Hello and welcome to my spoiler review for Godzilla x Kong, where let's talk kaiju. And of course, the really big surprise is Mothra, which I saw a couple of you guess. Were you surprised by Mothra? Was it able to be a big reveal for you? I mean, I think she was like reborn, right? Like it's always a new Mothra, right? And this was the moment where I talked about my non-spoiler review where the Godzilla fan in front of me put his arms up in silent joy when Mothra was revealed. Oh, it was great. And that made me appreciate her return all the more because it elicited that kind of reaction. Like I was like, oh cool, Mothra's in this movie. How did Warner Brothers manage to keep that under wraps? But then when I saw him do that, I was like, welcome back, Mothra. It was just great. After the movie, also, a female Godzilla fan who was sitting next to me, one of the fans I was talking to, she was so nice. She told me, because I asked her, I said, what'd you think of the movie? And she thought it was a really nice touch, she said, to have Gia awaken Mothra, since in the older films, Mothra had often been associated with twin girls. I guess, didn't Millie Bobby Brown kind of talk to Mothra too, come to think of it? But it's nice that they kept that tradition going in a sense. There was also the whole thing, by the way, with the lost Iwi civilization in Hollow Earth, which we'll discuss for sure. But as I said, first, let's talk about the main kaiju. How else? In the order of my favorites. And of course, as always, you can play along down below with your favorites as well. All right, so again, I'm a super casual fan when it comes to kaiju and titans. So these are the ones that appealed to moi. All right, so my favorite was actually Shimo. I had to look up this titan or kaiju's name. And apparently, she really is new for this movie. Only briefly mentioned in like a cave painting, apparently, in a Call of Duty crossover, no less. Wreck-It Ralph, with Godzilla versus Kong. I do like ice powers. Ice powers are always a goodie. And so I loved how Shimo iced the ground as she walked. Like when the Skar King's henchmen put that boulder into the lava, I thought they were going to create a lava lanche and they were going to burn Kong. But no, they were stopping the lava flow to let Shimo out of her cage. And at first I was like, is Godzilla here already? But no, it was Shimo! And I thought the reveal was really cool. The design was really cool. I loved it. And I love that she caused real damage, that she gave Kong frostbite. You know, so often you'll deal with characters who have ice powers and everyone can just shake it off. But no, he was like genuinely really injured. And so I thought that was great. That was the reason he needed the metal brace on his hand. I mean, which makes perfect sense when you see how it all goes down. In the trailer and the posters, it seems ridiculous that he's wearing that thing. But when you realize that he has been gravely injured, it's the only way he can use his hand and his arm. I mean, I thought it was really well realized, you know. I was like, oh, that's great. Now, she seems like a mini Godzilla to me. Very similar design, right? Even down to the spikes that power up when she's going to discharge a beam of power from her mouth, right? So I'm not sure why she acted like a pet. I mean, at first she was, of course, the prisoner of the Skar King and was abused by him. But then at the end, she was still a pet for Kong. I was like... Although Godzilla let Kong ride him at one point too, I was like, wait a minute, are you guys peers or what? Like, what's going on here? And then also, I mean, I have questions and I think it's a legit question. And I was also confused as to why when Godzilla saw Shimo, when I saw what Skar King was doing to Shimo, I was like, Godzilla's not gonna like this. You're hurting his lady friend, you know. Also, I was like, romantic interest for Godzilla. But I was like, oh, Godzilla's going to be upset. I thought it would be like the relationship that Kong had with Zuko, which turns out to be the name of baby Kong. So I thought, oh, they were creating that kind of a situation with Godzilla. And when Godzilla saw what the Skar King had done to one of his own, oh, he'd be really ticked off. But it never came up. Like, he never did a double take being like, who the heck is this? You know, when Godzilla came down there and they have that shot where like they're, you know, that's the whole reason that Kong rides Godzilla, so they can line up for this 2-on-2 slow-mo shot, right? Which I couldn't believe they put in a poster. I was like, that was one of the best shots in the movie. Save it for the movie. So, but at that point, you'd think Godzilla would be like, who the heck are you? You know, like, but they just never did anything with that, that's the only thing that didn't make sense to me in the movie. I know, right? Everything else I was fine with. giant crystal pillars that can change gravity, some kind of weird metal in the back that helps do it. I was like, sure. All right, so ranking the kaiju. Next, I gotta go with the Skar King. I know, he's the villain. But who doesn't love a good villain? I love his design. Is also just like Shimo. But clearly, a really bad dude who loves being a bad dude. I was like, oh, this guy's a problem. I can just see it. He's willing to do what needs to be done to keep control of this group, man. Watch out for him. This was the kaiju that I thought the VFX team really knocked out of the park in terms of body language. The whole sequence where he meets, even just the way he sat in his throne, but the whole sequence where he meets Kong and then through body language makes fun of Kong. I mean, it was just so well done. It was funny. It was really interesting. It was surprising because you don't usually see that between these large characters, these monsters, right? I mean, like, it was great. I thought it was great. I thought they'd make more out of him being an orangutan and having an incredible reach. I was like, he's going to be able to punch you in the face something fierce, Kong, and you're not going to be able to hit him back because that guy's got an incredible reach. I mean, I'm not a boxer, but I know that reach is important. But it turns out Skar King didn't need his reach because he had Shimo under his control, thanks to having one of her scales at the end of his bone whip. How did all these bones stay together, by the way? Are any of you a doctor or a medical student? Like that bridge of bones to get to the Skar King's area? I was like, how are these still staying together after all these years? I mean, I guess maybe they threaded them together, but I just didn't know if they had that level of ability. But I was like, I'm pretty sure there's nothing holding these bones together. But it was a cool look. The Skar King had impressive accessories, right? Just a very well-designed character. I love that he was bald. I mean, it was just great. He was like a twisted take on King Louie. He wanted to be, on the surface world. It was great. Great character. Then Zuko, aka Baby Kong. They also did a good job hiding the fact how vicious he was at first. That really surprised me and my audience. We were like, whoa, this little kid's a monster. But it was all we found out thanks to growing up in the Skar King's brutal kingdom. So Kong, of course, showed him a better way. But, I have to say, on that note, I did wonder, how would Kong be able to take over from the Skar King at the end of the movie? I mean, he rode up on Shimo, who is now his willing pet, and Kong is, of course, very strong. And an admirable dude. He's like the George Bailey of Hollow Earth. However, there were some very vicious apes in the Skar King's hierarchy who were not at the bottom and had gotten something for themselves, like his guardsmen to his throne room. And I was like, I don't think those apes are just going to roll over and let you be the leader, Kong. They're going to try and step up themselves. But you know what? Maybe Adam Wingard thinks that's the next movie. All the apes were very well realized, creatively. Sometimes the VFX looked really wonky, like not finished, kind of cartoonish. But still, even with the VFX not being like 120%, you could really tell that these apes were down on their luck. Not just physically, but emotionally, that the Skar King had truly beaten them down in every way possible. So that was very, very good. And to convey all of that, by the way, without dialogue successfully in a movie like this, I mean, I was just impressed that Adam Wingard and his team were able to accomplish that. You got a little Kingdom of the Apes here, as I said, so I can see why Warner Brothers very much wanted to get this out ahead of the new Disney Fox movie that's coming up. And I do wonder, we'll see how this movie does. Maybe they both won't do well. Maybe they'll both do well. Hey, let's be positive. But I do think they obviously have strong similarities. All right, so who's left? The main kaiju. I like the new characters. What can I say? So Godzilla, Kong, and Mothra. Next, I'd personally have to go with Godzilla, just because he has so many boss moments in the movie. Laying waste to Rome when we first meet him, including sleeping in the Colosseum like Adam Wingard's cat. I thought that was cute. And also, this was another interesting thing one of the Godzilla fans at the screening explained to me, was that in Godzilla's original movies, his older films, he always, it turns out, jumps off a cliff into the ocean. So to have him do that here off the Rock of Gibraltar, it not only was a cool shot in the movie, but apparently a really nice Easter egg for fans. I also like that Godzilla really was very much a giant reptile or a pet, not as human as Kong. And that he was reactionary. Like, he got that pink energy from another Titan so that he could deal with the huge threat that he could sense was coming, but didn't really know was coming, didn't really understand it. He just, he knew it was time to make the donuts yet again. Poor Kong. He's like, it's like constant work, man. He's got to take out Titans left and right. And there was also one shot in the movie where he's just pulsating with energy, like he's just gonna like explode, which he wants to. And I thought that was really cool. I was like, wow, Kong, you're pretty cool. Also, he does the very humanoid fight move where he puts his arms around Kong's waist, and then he flipped him over his head like a wrestler would. And it was hilarious. My entire theater, including myself, loved it. It was really, really funny. So I gotta give props to Godzilla for being the one to execute that move. Kong, though, to be fair, he's next on my list. He is the glue that holds the story together. He's feeling very alone in Hollow Earth, so finding these other giant apes, even if some of them are evil, is a lifeline for him. And he's the one who goes up to bring Godzilla down to Hollow Earth to help out. Like, Godzilla's hearing the call, but doesn't know how to answer it. He doesn't know how to answer the phone, baby. He doesn't have opposable thumbs. He can't answer the phone. So Kong goes up and gets him. So while Kong might not be the most exciting, the funniest, or have really cool accessories, his act's not so last movie. He's clearly, as I said, a good dude. He's the George Bailey of Hollow Earth. Oh, and he did have to visit the Monarch dentist early on in the film, which was a fun sequence. And it was a good way to introduce Dan Stevens' character, who it turns out is a kaiju veterinarian. Although he only seems to work on Kong. I'd be like, Godzilla, you got any boo-boos? He also Dan Stevens called himself a modern Dr. Dolittle. And I thought that was a cool, fun thing to add to the Monarch team. And we'll talk more about Monarch in just a minute, but I gotta finish my kaiju list. And the last one, I'm sorry to say, is Mothra. I mean, I respect Mothra for sure. I loved witnessing, again, that fan moment at my screening. But to me, she came across better, more majestic in Godzilla King of Monsters. She really made an impression on me in that film. I like that movie too. Very different movie than this one though. So here, while it was nice when she first arrived, and I was like, I could tell. I was impressed again. They kept it a secret. I could see from that fan's reaction that it was a great thing to add to the film that would really be great for fans. But I thought that I just didn't feel it after that. I mean, Mothra kind of flew around and spit some webs here and there, but she kind of took a back seat after her big reveal and just it wasn't like a trio. It wasn't like Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. It was still just Batman, Superman, and then Mothra was off to the side, being like, "All right, clean up in aisle 6." I did think it was interesting that she'd been removed from this shot in the trailers, though. That this was all three of them in the movie. So I was like, they just took that out of the shot for the trailers. Hilarious. All right, Monarch. In this movie, Monarch moves away from conspiracy theories, which I think maybe might be a good idea, and instead turns just into like a branch of the government, I think, that handles kaiju. I think they were government associated because they kept saying, "Ooh, we hate the private sector." But with all the destruction that the kaiju are creating that you see throughout the film, I'd say they probably actually aren't doing a very good job handling the kaiju and the titans. I'd be like, they're really laying waste to like when Godzilla took over that in France, the nuclear power plant, and they were like, they're like, "Sacre bleu, there's radiation everywhere." And you were like, that's like a serious problem. And then they were like, "Well, don't worry, Godzilla's eating the radiation." And I'm like, but then isn't Godzilla radiating radiation? So when Godzilla's walking around these towns, he's not only cities, he's not only destroying everything, but he's also radiating everybody. So I was like, well, this is a real big problem. And I think that Monarch clearly did not have it under control. The movie, by the way, as I said, mentions the private sector, and they also said that they're eager to get their hands on not just the kaiju, etc., but on Hollow Earth. So again, maybe that's a way to go forward with the next films. It seems a little like Jurassic Park, too. They have similar problems as to where to take the story after a certain point. Rebecca Hall's Dr. Andrews, I think, did make for a good Monarch spokeswoman. She didn't really seem like she was in control of anything, and she didn't seem to have any answers herself to anything. But I think she really, I was getting more spokeswoman off of her. But she was a great spokeswoman. I thought she was very good in that. I thought in the news segments at the beginning of the movie, she came across really well. I also like this extremely Guardians of the Galaxy shot where the team gets ready to deploy. I was like, you just ripped off Guardians of the Galaxy, Adam Wingard. That's fine. I also liked the deployment sequence overall. I thought that was great. Very Guardians of the Galaxy as well. But it had a fun theme park ride element to it that I think added to it. And good song choices from Adam Wingard, getting his James Gunn on. But why doesn't Brian Tyree Henry's character work for Monarch? And why didn't they at least give him more followers for his podcast? I'd have given him more followers. Hollywood likes to have this thing where they're like, oh, he's a down on his luck podcaster. I'm like, Why can't he be a really successful podcaster? I mean, the dude knows more about kaiju and titans than anyone, including Monarch. I would think that would get him some respect in, the online community. So I thought that was like, Hollywood still has some old tricks, writing tricks that they always fall back on. I think that's one that needs to be retired. I'm like, let the guy be successful, right? A lot of the movie is spent in Hollow Earth. Kudos to them. Like when the movie started, like with the credit sequence, I was like, this is like the same opening credit sequence as Aquaman 2. So I'm glad that it didn't slip into like Journey to the Center of the Earth kids movie. Even though I think, families and kids would like this movie, it didn't fall into the kiddie realm like Aquaman 2 eventually did. But they can't keep making these movies all very similar. They got to be able to seem a little different. But also in Hollow Earth, why is there sky down there? If it's in the middle of the earth, how are they looking at the sky? And also, I didn't understand then why the Skar King, when he came to the surface at the end, was like, is this the sky? I was like, it looks just like the sky you just saw, buddy. What are you so surprised about? I think he'd be more pointing at all the buildings and the people. And then, of course, back in Hollow Earth, when that tree eats the pilot, the movie did get a little Jumanji there. But to the movie's credit, it just kept moving along briskly, so it was okay. And then, of course, the lost Iwi Tribe, which I thought was depicted very respectfully. And it was interesting to see their civilization, which I thought was pretty well thought out. I'm not sure why Gia felt she had to choose where to live, because clearly Monarch is going to have to work with the Iwi going forward. So I was like, you can spend summers here. That's not an issue. Finally, the destruction. All right, so they had two, I think, really good sequences. Rome, of course, and then also Rio de Janeiro. That was really well done. My audience laughed when it was Rio de Janeiro. And then they had the great music again come up. But then as that giant wave froze, when Shimo came in, the music slowed down, right? So that was all fun. And then, wow, Rio de Janeiro really took a major hit, boy. Wow, mass destruction. But the thing that, I said something really shocked me when I saw it. And so it's a spoiler review, and I can tell you. And that was the destruction of when Godzilla threw that Titan at the beginning of the movie into the famous, wedding cake building in Rome. Now, I saw that building in person when I visited Rome, and it was pointed out to me that it was the wedding cake building and what a big deal it is. And it's in so many movies at this point. And every time I see it, I'm reminded of when I got to see it in real life. It was in John Wick, right? And it's truly incredible. In fact, in all my, I've been fortunate enough to go to Europe a few times, and these architectural works of art, I'm curious if any of you have had a similar experience. They just hit different seeing them in real life than seeing them in a photo. They almost seem surreal, like a dream. Another one for me was the Arc de Triomphe. It was just incredible that it actually existed. So to see the wedding cake building just destroyed in an instant, it made you feel so helpless and small, which is how you'd probably feel in a world full of titans and kaiju. So I guess the movie, to some degree, did its job showing you that. I guess by using landmarks, I think it just made it hit the audience that much more, Very, very interesting. So that's my spoiler review of Godzilla x Kong. What did you think of the movie? Share your spoiler thoughts down below, as well as your favorite kaiju. Subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.